You and I, for example, you're already building a mental box for me. I'm a farmer, former dairy farmer. You get these parameters in your mind. Well, I just encourage people to first of all not build the box to begin with, and once you discover that you built one, just burn it, get rid of it.
I'll start by saying, Doug Voss, thanks very much for joining me today on the Holy Crop podcast. Holy Crop, it's Farmageddon is the name of the podcast. We spoke originally probably a few months ago, back end of 2025, when we were first looking at doing the festival, and we reached out to you because you stand out as one of the inspirations, for want of a better term, around soil health, just through the transitions that you've made and the knowledge that you have through your own farming experience and setting up the Soil Health Academy. So I was hoping, Doug, we could just start by you giving a bit of an introduction and a bit of background about why have you set the academy up, who's it for, what's it about, and specifically around your background in farming as well.
Yeah, very good. I'd be happy to. So, Doug Voss, I hail from central Minnesota, U.S. We were just talking a little bit before we're starting to record here that from cold country, from Minnesota winters, we just experienced a little 40 below weather a few weeks back. So, a little bit of a context to where I come from. But my back upbringing or my growing up years came from our farm here, which is traditionally a dairy farm in central Minnesota. Conventional in the day in which my dad managed yet, and my grandfather, both considered fair, I guess, on the forefront of new technology, which is interesting with where things have turned now with changes we've made on the farm. But really a focus on natural systems and farming and evaluating our stewardship or our management has gotten us to the point now where we understand soil function better and it's directly influenced the way we manage the resource. And it's been a journey, and I guess I'll add that, use that word probably more than one in our conversation this morning, is that it is a journey, it's not a destination. So everybody should be encouraged to invest in themselves in ongoing education to understand better what they do and how their management influences the resource and the products that we get from it. And so traditionally a dairy farm, yeah, I grew up milking cows. We still support the dairy industry. Today we've grown to a more of a custom grazing enterprise. We influence probably 4 times as many acreages as we once did 20, 30 years ago, but to improve it as well as produce really good products from it. And I can expand upon that a little bit later. But we custom graze, so we take on animals for the growing season, and we jokingly refer to it as summer camp for cows. So in bred heifers and dry cows need their pastures to support their organic production standards. A number of them leave the dairy farm where they're being milked, and they come to our farm for the summer for a number of months. Typically, a grazing season for us is about 160 days of grazing. Even if we do have as severe cold as we do, we can manage for that. And so that means that the dairy farmer can focus on their lactating herd and what pays their bills, and also growing stored feed for the winter months for that dairy herd as compared to managing their heifers and their dry cows so close to the milking facility. And what we have found is we can build upon successes year after year. And with increased diversity and improving the resource, we notably have seen the difference in the disposition of the animals that we graze. So if you can picture it as an example, you bring that first calf heifer in, she's experiencing something new. She's had a calf, she's swelled in places that she's not normally used to feeling, and she's sensitive, and her first objective is to swat her hoof at somebody that wants to touch her and milk her. Well, with the changes that we've made, now instead of she wanting to do damage to the person milking the cows, that she walks in like a second and third lactation animal today, relaxed, easygoing. One in part because of superior nutrition from what we've been known to provide, I guess, years ago, and also just the routine and the association that when she sees people, she is used to seeing a reward, because every time she sees a person in a pasture, she associates that with classical conditioning to a fresh bite of grass and something that she maybe hadn't eaten yesterday, maybe something new, or just that herd tendency and the good environment that we've been able to provide with good stewardship. And so realizing the benefits of understanding soil function and understanding our role and how we can either negatively impact that or positively improve the resource for a number of different benefits is what really drives us with not only improving our management on our own farm at Voss Farms, but also what I refer to as off-farm work, which is encouraging others in the regenerative world with shared values and holding constructive conversations to collectively do better.
Well, that sounds. There's a couple of things that jump out from that, Doug. Firstly, a summer camp for cows. I've got images of them up on stage doing performances and having cattle competitions, which I think is great. But that's also basically, from what you're saying there, is that there's almost like a correlation between the work that you're doing on the farm there and soil health and animal welfare.
There absolutely is. From the idea of animal welfare being more focused on facilities, we're focused on the resource. So if you think about it, I mean, how long we've actually been thinking about the standards in which we consider it acceptable today with facilities and what some of that means. I mean, there's enormous considerations that we should be holding, conversations about, such as uh, nutrient efficiency. Let's just take, for example, if you put an animal in confinement, a very small percentage of the fertility that comes from those animals ever makes it back into a usable form in the fields. And just take, for example, a third of the fertility that comes out the back end of a cow comes in the form of urine, which is going to volatilize off unless it's tied to a carbon source. And all that is coming at an additional cost as compared to having that animal appropriately integrated on the landscape, where you're going to capture as much as nature's allowed with what comes out the back for future production. And oftentimes, when we're taking a piece of ground that hasn't had livestock integrated on it for decades, the first response we see is those urine patches. It's not in those places with the dung land because there isn't sufficient microbes there to process that product yet because it's gone dormant for so long. And so realizing the benefits of the fertility and the efficiency, or what we've grown to learn as perceived efficiency with confinement agriculture, certainly has its limitations worth discussing.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in a bit more detail. I remember reading somewhere that in, I think it was 1881, Charles Darwin first published a work about the importance of earthworms and soil health, and that was 145 years ago. And I remember reading that and thinking, why is soil health still a bit of a fringe movement? Why are we 145 years on and using more chemicals than we've ever used? And my question to you as a farmer is, I'm assuming that a lot of farmers are aware that soil health is important, but it still seems, when we talk about soil health, we talk about biodiversity, we talk about regenerative farming, it's all, and organic farming. It almost seems a bit sort of a fringe movement, a hippie movement, and almost in some countries a bit of a dirty term. It's sort of seen as organic food is expensive, it's unnecessary. We've got mono farming, we've got chemical treatments, and all the rest of it. So I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts? What is healthy soil to you, and how can farmers actually improve their yields and generate higher incomes with lower costs by switching, or certainly reducing the number of chemicals that are using, and embracing some of these techniques that you're talking about with regenerative farming?
Yeah, so that's a big topic. We'll try to unpack it a little bit. First of all, I want to recognize the fact that the issue of soil health is it's a social issue. It's not a technological issue. It's not a tool issue. It's a social issue. When we're talking regenerative agriculture and understanding age-old natural systems that we are just now starting to have a better understanding of, I would say, in part because I think we're looking to learn. But the other side of things is that these systems have been working regardless of our understanding of them for a very long time. It's a matter of a few different things. One is really recognizing paradigm changes. There's a lot of focus in agriculture on a user or a consumer mentality or perspective. I mean, there's a margin in agriculture, right? There's a lot of agribusinesses out there trying to sell whatever products that they claim are going to improve your life. Where my experience, and I'm not denying that there are some products out there that can maybe help, But more times than not, I've found that maybe if something's not working, the first thing I need to do is stop doing what I'm doing that's not working, and not look for a product that can save or provide the silver bullet response that I'm looking for. And all the tools in nature are there. Nature is self-aligning, self-healing, and self-regulating if you let it, but you can't get in the way, right? So you have to encourage natural processes and you have to encourage life. A lot of the products that we've looked to use in agriculture in years past, they kill something. And when you kill something, you disrupt a whole soil food web, and you may be creating another problem with trying to address the initial problem that you thought was your worst. and
Yeah.
I always joke, once you flush the toilet, one thing I've learned is the further down you go, the faster it spins, right? So I mean, if you're going to compile, you know, garbage on garbage, eventually you're going to have
I,
a pretty good spiral going down.
I think I've witnessed that myself, though.
Yeah, right. Okay. So it's looking at things as a whole, not losing sight of that, and realizing and giving yourself an opportunity to do better, right? Be real with evaluating where you're at with things, what your impact is. But just for example, I mean, if you use a chemical, and I'm not saying all chemicals are bad. I'm not saying we should never use any chemicals. We don't choose to use any agrochemicals in our farm with organic production, and we can do quite well without them. But let's say you do, just be aware of what you're using and the effects that that's going to have. There's one thing to have an acute disruption in your soil system. There's another thing to have a chronic one. So just with that, a little tidbit is identifying when a product goes from a tool classification to a crutch, and that is when you're routinely using it, but it doesn't necessarily hold any long-term benefits to your soil. Then we need to reevaluate and look at how we may be able to use it less or at all.
So this is a point, and I think that the the tool or the crutch is a very good analogy, because for me, I could, being on the outside of farming and just finding this all very interesting. How do you know? How can you tell? So clearly, if you're growing grain or you're growing potatoes, you're typically doing mono farming. You're growing the same type of stuff in the same area in the same way year after year is typically what's happening. Um, and so my impression is you'd be using the same chemicals, the same treatments. So that has an impact on the soil, and therefore you are addressing that impact by adding additives to that soil. So typically fertilizers into the soil, because you're taking some of the nutrition out, and then you need to add that back in. So how do you measure soil health, and how do you know if you have a tool that's helping or if you are actually making it worse? How do you actually know that?
Yep. So ways to evaluate your soils include a very, very technologically advanced tool, the shovel. And you take a shovel out and you evaluate whether the texture of your soil looks like dark cottage cheese or if it looks like slated concrete, for example, or if you can get the shovel in at all. It should go in easily. That's just one of the very basic tools. But looking at that, some assumptions in your example that you gave that I want to pick apart just a little bit. First of all, let's just take potatoes, for example. Okay, so potatoes, yeah, very highly impacting crop to grow, right? There's a lot of tillage. We're moving a lot of soil and that type of thing. Okay, that could be an acute situation, or it could be chronic, depending on how often we're trying to grow potatoes. Now, typically here in the U.S., you can't grow potatoes every year or even every other year because of the disruption and oftentimes the agrochemicals that's required to maintain production. So that means then we're spreading that out every fourth year or something like that to reduce pest impacts and things like that. Well, what would happen if we hyper sensitized ourselves in our management to implementing as many soil health principles and practices the alternate years as those potatoes? And I'll give you an example of what can happen. We can drastically reduce fungicides, pesticides overall in those years that we do grow potatoes, because we are encouraging the life that can support that system without making it fall apart. So, for example, a complex cover or maybe a perennial crop alternating years of potatoes is going to service a lot more root exudates and a lot more biology than a monocrop situation would be. And so think of it like this too, from a pest and disease persistence situation. If you've got a tractor with a bank of hydraulic hookups on the back, you want to make sure you fill every one of those plugs where every one of those hoses goes in with the beneficial. If you leave them open, you're leaving yourself open for non-beneficials to come in and adhere to your system and drain it out. And so you want to encourage, it's as simple as encouraging life and recognizing what suppresses the life in your management. So we've got producers in the US that have drastically reduced the number of chemicals and even some of the fungicides altogether on potato production just by enhancing their regenerative management on the years opposite those potatoes, and they can grow potatoes more often on the same acre of ground than they could with their old system with more monocrops.
Wow. Okay. So basically, what you're saying is the potatoes are taking certain nutrients out of the soil. So the following season or the following year, you then have a cover crop which puts those nutrients back into the soil. There's a nutrient exchange, and that cover crop is stopping the growing of weeds or growing of unwanted things within that land. Is that what you're saying, or have I heard it wrong?
It could appear that way. So here we gotta stop a couple paradigm change. We gotta stop a paradigm right now. So the idea of userism with nutrients. First of all, I have yet to test any soil in the U.S. that has any nutrient deficiency, any mineral deficiency. And we use a nutrient digestion test for that, total nutrient digestion test. And so if you share that information and with an agronomist, for example, they'll say, yes, that's true. It's all there, but it's not available. Well, instead of taking it to the next question, well, then how do we make it available? We've over applied and we put additional nutrients on, some of which are bio or plant available. But the idea is the bridge that connects, let's say, geology with plant available nutrition is biology. So why aren't we pushing biology? And the correct biology to make that all happen can only happen with sufficient diversity. What's sufficient, is going to have to be evaluated in that soil, but we're always pushing for diversity and making that more complex. So um, we're looking at cycling nutrients. Okay, sure, there's going to be some nutrients coming off, but we're getting in way more solar energy that we can convert to more plant available nutrients if our stewardship allows. And so, as opposed to this consumerism that, okay, we're going to use a bunch of stuff, now we have to look for some place in our region to replace it so we can grow it again. No, we want to enhance the efficiency of that solar capture of that energy so that our system is regenerative. I mean, that's one of the ways that the term has been used overall. So we need to think about cycling nutrients, and carbon is the currency that we do that, whether it's the root exudates that those plants are giving off through their growing season, or whether it's crop residues that shouldn't be toxic also, by the way, right? I mean, if we've read, qualities into those things with, corn borer resistance or GMO products, that's an issue in and of itself. But if we're effectively cycling crop residues and nutrients in our system and feeding the microbes that we want to support future production, it's a much better approach than thinking about using something up and then trying to find it in a cost-effective economic sense that we can do it all over again next year.
So I mean that's really interesting, because what you're basically saying is that you can grow, for example, potatoes more frequently on the same land. So rather than it being every third year or every fourth year, you could potentially do it every second year, for example, or every other year.
There is
So
that potential.
from your experience then, if you start moving to this, and as you said, it's a cultural knowledge shift or slightly different way of thinking. So with that hat on and with that way of thinking, what's been the I mean, let's just talk about what everyone cares about, which is the financial impact. So
Mhm.
what's the financial impact then if we start to adopt more regenerative farming practices? What do I have to buy new equipment? I mean, you were talking earlier about using less diesel, for example, potentially higher yields with more regular farming. So talk me through. Do we have to buy new equipment? Do we need new tools, different ways of working, or is it just all because from what you're saying is it's just all positive, but there has to be some investment or some other financial impact somewhere?
Yeah, that depends on you. And I often start this conversation with farmers when we consult is asking, what do you want? What are your goals? And so many people haven't considered the fact that they can even generate a goal. They think that they're in this box. They're trying to tweak a system that's in place that they think they have to live with. I mean, that's not the case. So, I mean, we haven't, with the exception of a new transition farm for us this year, a rental piece, we hadn't bought seed in probably, I don't know, 12 years. Um, and so, we're using the latent seed bank as much as possible. There's seeds in the soil, and and if some people don't believe that, then I ask them when was the last time they saw wheat growing in their field, and I'm like, well, that's the latent seed bank. We just want the right seeds to express themselves. But just as an example, that we don't have the same inputs at all. But we asked ourselves, what do we want to do? Well, we wanted to be profitable. Certainly wanted to be profitable, but we had to really take a look at why we wanted to do what we wanted to do. And in our case, I'll just give you an example of a little bit of the process of where we went through. Once I had a better handle on the principles of soil health and soil function, I realized that I didn't need less animals for my farm, I needed more. And I didn't want to go out and leverage myself financially to go buy them. I wasn't exactly sure how the economics were going to work out. So we recognized a need in the dairy industry for custom grazing. So typically what would happen is, farmers are spread thin with labor anyway. And so they have to prioritize their efforts. And oftentimes the bred heifers are the ones that took the back seat because they weren't putting the milk in the tank that day to pay the bills tomorrow. And so priorities changed throughout the growing season. So we said, well, this may be a way for us to get more animals. And we did it at a very cheap cost initially because we realized that one, we needed to be able to prove ourselves as grazers, and two, we needed to get to the resource. We needed to develop the resource to the point where we could produce good enough quality forages to get the results that we wanted. We didn't really have any trouble meeting those objectives at the beginning, but it did mean that we could command a little bit higher price per head per day for our services over time. And that's all going to depend on what services you provide. For example, if you're breeding those heifers AI, or in our case, we run bulls so they take care of the breeding. But getting back to the whole why is that I realized I needed more animals. I needed animal impact. I needed to be able to grow enough forage, and I needed to have an efficient enough system where I could feed the microbes that I wanted to support the farm in the future. And so then we started custom grazing. We were able to bring them in. We had enough flexibility where we explained very, very accurately, and we were very transparent with the dairy that, listen, if we had a drought, for example, they may have to go home early. We're going to do our best to manage, not to push the envelope so that we're at max capacity all the time. So we have some flexibility, but we did have some drought years. One year we did have to send some animals home early. So that meant I wasn't overgrazing my farm because I had animals that I thought I had to support. And we were able to use those animals as a tool to improve the resource over time. And one of the ways that we evaluated it was the Brix levels of the forages. And I will admit, we had embarrassingly low Brix levels when we first started doing what we're doing. We raised hay with Brix levels in the single digits, like 3 to 5. And now, the last few years, the lowest we've recorded Brix levels have been 14, and we've recorded mid 20s with Brix levels, and that's a direct correlation with nutrient density of the forage coming from the farm.
So what are Brix levels? Is that the sugars and the that are available within the grasses, or I know it's some type of measure for sugars, isn't it?
It is. It's often thought of as sugars alone, but it's actually total dissolved solids in a
Okay.
solution. So you squeeze some juice out of your grasses or your plants, you put them in a refractometer. I should have it handy here, and in fact I might. And you hold it up to the light, and it gives you a reading. It's almost like reading a thermometer, a mercury thermometer in the lens. And the higher the level, the better. It's usually on a scale of 0 to 32. And it's also, I mean, it's been used in the fruit and wine industry for years, even in evaluating colostrum milk from cows. But we use it for a total nutrient digestion, or in the solution when we use it from a grazing perspective.
Okay. You touched on a couple of really interesting points there. I think the first one being the journey, and recognizing that stuff is done in a certain way because it's the way it's always been done. And we're looking to just tweak those to find potentially new efficiencies, or there's legislation changes that need to be incorporated. So if you're a farm, and I guess a lot of farmers, they're trained by their parents, they then take over the farm. I think that was probably similar in your case, and you come in potentially with new ideas. You go to agricultural college, you learn some stuff, you do some reading. What that journey for you was quite specific because it was around dairy and around soil and all the rest of it. I guess what I find quite interesting is as a farmer, how do you know that there's other options, and how do you go about even thinking, okay, what journey should I be on? What's the is there an end game? Because the end game would potentially mean there's a destination, but you said there isn't really a destination, it's just the journey. So give me some insight into your thinking, and what does a journey actually look like?
Yeah. So I'll use my example. My dad, I give him a tremendous amount of credit. He got to a point in his career. He said, what? I recognize some changes have to be made. I don't know that I can make them. He said, so I know that's the time for the next generation to step in. And he gave me the opportunity to do that. Now, not every farm has that, but I'll just use my dad's example of his hatred for weeds. My dad had a hatred for weeds. If there was a weed out there, which by the way, there's no objective definition for, right? It's all subjective. And so if there was a weed out there, he would spray, and if there was still weeds out there, he would spray again to the point where they were spraying multiple times, but he had less control on his weeds than he did the previous 5 years. And so, that really got me looking. I'm like, well, it's not working. First of all, the intention might be there, but it's not working. And so, why isn't it working? And, we could talk on that half the day, but the fact of the matter is, we needed to understand what we were doing when we applied the chemicals. And in his case, in the field that is coming to my mind that I'm using for an example, it was uh, it was continuous corn production, and his litmus test for whether he should continue to grow corn was based on yield. Well, okay, you could still grow something. We didn't evaluate whether the quality of that yield was the same or not. So, with that, I'll put a little plug in. I think we should be far concerned about feeding the world than we are about nourishing the world. And so, we need to look at the impact of what we're doing, the product coming from it, the toxin level, and everything else. In our case, we didn't have the same nutrient density in the feeds going in. We had challenges with our milking herd, and so looking at that big picture, well, we needed to do something different. So yeah, I did. Exactly as you said. I went to ag school, right? And the whole focus on my education, formal education at dairy herd management degree that I got was where is the industry going? It wasn't resource based. It wasn't efficiencies based. It was where is the industry going? What kind of ventilation do we need? Because what are the trends on the new facilities going up? Are we using a total mixed ration? Are we doing buffet style? How is this going? And I didn't see the efficiency that everybody stood upon because when we start talking nuts and bolts, I saw a lot more debt and I saw a lot of production shortfalls being covered up with expansion. And a lot of farms that did expand, they didn't improve their quality of life. There was this idea that they would. There was no guarantee that they would. And often cases, it grew to the point where we have the same industry as we have in the poultry and the swine industry with dairy today, with the exception of organic or grass fed. That's the only situation where I say we have an exception. And so it finally got to the point where we did convert to organic production, and this is back in 1999, for two reasons. One, I wanted to reduce cost. I wanted to eliminate a lot of the products, incentivize and provide an opportunity to capitalize off of those efforts with a different market, right? So we had an opportunity to sell at a higher price, lower our costs, but we didn't address the resource first. We didn't understand how the resource functioned at a basic level. And so we made mistakes, but it allowed us to still get to where we are today. If we hadn't taken those steps, I mean, I was the crazy one, right? One of the crazy ones. You're organic. You're going to go organic. Well, first of all, you're going to go broke, right? That was the idea. You're going to go broke because you're going to go organic, because we need these things, right? That's this idea that we need all these products in order to farm today. And I didn't see any benefits of them long term. And so when you're critical of things like that, you find ways. I always joke that we spend so much time building and maintaining mental boxes for, like you and I, for example, you're already building a mental box for me. I'm a farmer, former dairy farmer. You get these parameters in your mind. Well, I just encourage people to, first of all, not build the box to begin with. And once you discover that you built one, just burn it. Get rid of it. Okay. So if I thought, well, I used to think that I couldn't even farm without tractors. We used to farm with three 200 horsepower tractors, and they're all sitting in the back of my house, all needing repairs so they can get off the farm or get parked in the shed because I haven't used them now for about 8 years. Not one tractor have we turned on the farm in 8 years. I have a loader on the farm, but outside of that, I've got a couple pickups we haul cattle with. We don't make any feed at all anymore. So you'd think in Minnesota we need to feed a lot of hay. Well, we even burnt that mental box 2 years ago, and we started shipping our own beef herd down 800 miles south in Missouri to winter. And so the whole summer we stockpile grass on a farm in Missouri that they graze all winter long before they come back to Minnesota and graze green grass in Minnesota again. So this will
Right.
be our second year consecutive that we haven't fed one bale of hay to our beef herd. And when the dairy heifers come and the dry cows from the dairies in the region here, then of course we're grazing new growth from this year too. So uh, we don't have to accept everything we've heard, and I do believe it probably takes roughly 1 to 3 years to unlearn in real life what a formal education might propose to teach you, because there's a lot of things in theory that a lot of teachers will teach, but if they're not practitioners, I have a hard time not questioning everything.
Yeah, it needs to be evidence backed, really, doesn't it? And practitioners and stuff is the only real way. But I think you touched on a couple of very interesting points there. We'll go back to the journey part in a minute. But I think just with regards to the not using tractors. So at the moment, are you growing any crops on the farm at all? Do you still have corn and stuff on the farm, or is it just you literally just have cattle there on the farm in the summer?
Yeah, everything is in a perennial system with the exception of some transitional acres now. So when I mean transitional, they've come from the industrial model for years. The farm that I'm speaking of for 10 years has been farmed conventionally, the chemical approach and everything else. So we are integrating annual crops, forage crops on that in between some grains. So we custom hire any tractor work or harvesting on that one farm, but that's the only farm we actually drive a tractor over. Everything else is got maybe a side by side or a quad that just goes across it to put up temporary fencing inside a perimeter fence, and the animals do all the harvest.
Yeah.
Even if we were to have to supplement some hay bales on it, we're feeding them out on pasture. We're not feeding them in the yard and then transporting manure back to the pasture later.
Um, and with regards to the journey, I think it's so you started in 1999. You became organic. So did you just literally take over the farm and then in 1999 to say, right, we're not using any chemicals? So overnight you just switched to an organic farm?
Pretty close. I mean, we weren't using much in 80, 98, 97 or 98. We used very, very limited chemical or fertilizer applications anyway, so that it wasn't a big jump. But I do want to touch on something, not to interrupt maybe your thought process, but the one thing is that we didn't really address the why. I mean, why is it all perennials? Is it just because you love grazing cattle? It's part of it, but there's no other way that I know of to facilitate a faster restoration. And I hesitantly use the word restoration, but improvement, I'd say. Perennials, we have a living root year round. We have integrated livestock. We have the flexibility in our model to make sure that we're not over impacting because we're moving cattle daily. So maybe at the most 3 days out of the year, any acre on our farm has animals actually standing on it. So it's a very acute disruption as opposed to chronic. There's no set stock grazing where we turn them out and come back in the fall and pick them up again. We're moving cattle daily, sometimes multiple times a day, depending on our resource goals. But we can always go back and grow whatever we want to in the future once we get to a certain level of improvement on the soil. And that's where I've come from is that if I want to grow corn again someday, I can. I'm just not going to set myself up to have to do it with a lot of inputs. And
Yeah.
so we can have a system in place to do that as long as we're prudent about it.
So and I think that's also really interesting. So with the Soil Health Academy, you're obviously training, you're giving practitioner courses to farmers to come in to learn some of the methodologies around regenerative farming. So how many of these types of courses have you run, and what have been the results from farmers that are coming in, hoping to set themselves new journeys and learn from you?
Yeah, so it's on a spectrum, right? You could offer the same information to 5 different people and have 5 different results. And so um, the ones that embrace and really put some intentionality behind change or advancement are doing exceptionally well. In fact, next week we're going where a farm is expanding into another state, and they're adding another farm to their operation, and they're tripling. I guess, their farm size in a couple of years just from the successes that they've had, and in part with our guidance, with again understanding soil function and understanding the impacts of their management. Other farms, we've had some farms that aren't willing to do some of the change. They're afraid of change. They want to farm only if it fits in their paradigm that they started farming in. They don't have the idea in their mind or the acceptance that they could maybe do it without the shiny big 500 horsepower tractor. And that's fine if that's your goal. But you have to identify your goals and your values. Without doing that, it's pretty tough. But we've had farms that have completely eliminated pesticide and herbicide applications altogether. They're growing healthier crops. Their livestock, if they have livestock on the farm, are healthier. And so it's on a spectrum. The opportunity is there, and we're willing to walk you through that and help you along the journey if you want to. But like any horse, you can't, of course, make it take a drink once you get it up to the water trough. And so it really provides an opportunity for people to look internally to themselves and understand what their own personal goals are.
Yeah, and I think personal goals is one, but in my mind, I've got it down as also personal risk, because it's depending on, I guess, how long you've been farming for and what your thoughts are around it. Surely you'd be looking, going, I know roughly what I'm going to get as a yield year after year if I carry on farming in this way. And yeah, your costs are going to go up, and there might be variation in yield, but is it seen as high risk to a lot of farmers, do you think? I mean, I'm guessing you only see the ones that, because they're coming on your courses, so they probably recognize the need for a change and they want to start a journey, but that's probably quite a small percentage of farmers, and I'm just wondering how many of them are quite sort of stuck in a bit of a status quo of a standard way of working, and risk averse to trying new stuff, because actually they're okay with just paying a little bit more year after year for pesticides, fertilizers, and they're sort of a little bit in the hamster wheel.
Yeah, so it's a personal journey for sure. First of all, there is a lot of focus on yield. And first of all, yield does not pay my bills. Profit pays my bills. And so
Yeah.
that's one paradigm change that we have to address, if not immediately, yesterday, right? Because that's one of these paradigms and these things. Because if you go to a trade show, you're going to find everybody's uncle's cousins trying to sell you a product that's going to give you 2 more bushels of corn. If you added them all up, you should probably be getting close to what, 800, 900 bushels to the acre, right? Well, it doesn't work that way. So we need to look at profit. We need to be real about it. But you and I are also coming from countries that have enormous subsidy programs that are safety nets, and I'll call almost safe to fail trials. First of all, you don't have to take your whole farm. I mean, prove it out on a portion of your farm, but be deliberate. Who's going to grow broke if they took 1% or 2% of their farm and learned from it and did side by side trials in their own fields? This doesn't have to happen overnight. I may be a little bit crazier than the average. I mean, with some of the things that I've done, switch it all to perennials and put all your eggs in one basket. Well, I mean, I could graze sheep tomorrow if I wanted to. I don't have to graze cattle. So we have flexibility in livestock species that way, but we have to look at profit. We have to look at the true cost of our products, and if our trends are to reduce those inputs, or if they're, taking some pressure off. If we're highly dependent on situations, and then we're too afraid to even do a trial, like for example, if the crop looks good, and the crop agronomist says, "Oh, it looks great, but man, you're not going to want to run the risk of not putting that fungicide on. You could lose the whole thing yet." Well, you could. You could also die tomorrow by pulling out in your driveway with your car for the first time, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily going to stop driving altogether. What's wrong with doing a split trial and spraying half the farm with the fungicide and the other half not? Now we have a real opportunity to evaluate the product coming off of that farm, and then we have to be also cognitive of the fact that that product is being impacted, and the product that leaves the farm with the way we treat it is going to impact the person that's going to consume that product.
Yeah, and I think that's a critical thing as well, because I'm coming at this from a more of a homestead. I've come from my father in particular. He always had his little vegetable plot in the garden and chickens and stuff, and so that was how I grew up. And I've always grown, food at home, and I've always been amazed at the focus on yield rather than nutritional value. And you sort of think we're living longer, Actually, in the last few years, that's changed, hasn't it? There's been, I think it's the first time in modern history that the life expectancy's dropped by a couple of years since, I think in the last 5 years or something like that. But generally speaking, life expectancy has got longer and longer. But yet there's more and more medicines around. You sort of look and just go, I wonder, and it seems like there's two camps. There's camps of people that just want to buy organic food because they recognize that nutritional value is important, and then there's the others that just buy cheap food because they're buying to eat rather than buying as part of their health plan.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think we do need to recognize the dash, right? So you got the headstone out there, you have two dates on. It's just as important to me that the quality of that dash in between those two numbers as it is how long. And so, yeah, we may be living longer in general, with the exception of what you just mentioned as far as maybe our current population. But what's the quality of that life, too? And if you're talking about the increase, I mean, we have degenerative diseases today in scopes that we haven't had before. We've had, you know, the number of folks in the U.S. who qualify for military service compared to years ago is dwindling. We don't have the fit nation we once had, and so we have to look at that overall situation. And we're supposed to be one of the most advanced countries in the world, but yet we're one of the most sickest, and our healthcare costs are far and above beyond what others would think are less developed countries. Well, that's an indicator, right? We should be real with that. We should be looking at that. And as far as backyard and your homesteaders, excellent. I'll just use egg production for example. We had egg prices here in the U.S. that just exploded last couple of years. Whether it was disease in the industrial industry that drove it up, because we had bird flu in the U.S. and so we had a decrease in production, and so those backyard growers probably realized that they could produce at a profit as opposed to in the past if they were just trying to buy the cheapest eggs possible. But an egg is one of the easiest things to even evaluate with your eye on quality. If that yolk, I always joke, if my pancakes aren't orange, they're not good enough, right? There's not enough B vitamins in that yolk. It should almost glow orange as compared to a pale yellow. What is the difference? What's the value of having that superior nutrition? And you have to ask that question to yourself. I mean, if you enjoy growing them in your backyard and you can have some food security, and you have a good system that you're not reliant on just buying feed all the time. You can generate some of your own chicken feed. You can make use of some of the bugs that you don't want biting you around the yard. They can make food out of them. That's great. That can be part of the system. Some backyard folks, I think if they were real about their actual cost of production with their scale, they might really question whether or not they want to grow them anymore or not. Because there is, the economy of scale. But again, what are your goals? Do you enjoy going out there? Do you think it enhances your property? Do you think you're enhancing your own health by having your own chickens in your backyard? You should absolutely do it. If you hate it and you're producing eggs at 3 times the cost of what you could buy them from your neighbor who doesn't understand the value of what they're selling, hey man, there's another opportunity, right? But looking at that and deciding for yourself, I think, is important.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, because it's I've always joked that I grow the world's most expensive tomatoes because it's very easy to get carried away, go out and buy some soil and plant them, and they don't necessarily do particularly well. You get like 3 tomatoes off and you've spent way too much money, but it's fun to try. And I guess it's a little bit the balance as well between perennials and annual plants as well. Perennials in many ways make a lot more sense. They might be higher investment up front, but it's less work over time with more consistent yields potentially as well. So I think it's trying to get the balance right.
Well, the one thing nice with perennials is they're going to acclimate and they're going to produce in your environment, or they're not. Every year we have this new idea that, well, maybe this year's tomato will outproduce last year's tomato, right? If we're buying it every year. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's very true. A couple of things. How good do you think farmers are at sort of knowledge sharing if they are trying stuff on their land? Is it something that they're quite good at, or do they just I'm just wondering what your sort of cultural experience is.
Yep. So culturally, there's a stiff divide between those of a regenerative or organic mindset than there are those from the conventional industrial model. The conventional industrial model will look at their neighbor as a competitor.
Yeah.
They want to rent the neighbor's land if it's available. They think it should be a part of their operation, as compared to the alternative, the regenerative. They're sharing ideas. They're opening. They're willing to share with their neighbor what's worked and what hasn't worked, and even discuss it because they want to figure out why didn't it work. And that kind of cooperative, collective partnership, man, it's hard to not stress the importance and value there, because it's refreshing. First of all, I mean, we're a community again, as opposed to just business competitors, and we're collectively trying to make everything better. From for example, we have a lot of lakes in our region, right? Minnesota is known for our lakes. But we have a river that goes through one of our home pastures that leads to two lakes eventually. And upstream in that river, it comes from three main drainage ditches in farming country, who are contributing to 80% of the problems that come
Yeah.
into these lakes. They're both now considered impaired waterways. There are times that they look like pea soup because of all the algae blooms, and they're not getting any better as far as that perspective goes. I can tell you we're not contributing to the problem with the way we're operating the land that the river goes through. But unfortunately, overall, we're kind of losing that game. Now, if it weren't for the subsidy programs that support bad practices, we would have a very different scenario. I mean, look at New Zealand and Australia with the way their subsidy programs ended years ago. That changed things enormously for those countries. And until we have major change with policy here, I don't know that much is going to change big picture wise. I mean, we're going to have micro changes and improvements here and there, but culturally, there's no reason to change as long as there's a safety net that says, well, you can try again next year. And if you're profitable next year, great. But we're going to let you go another year with the way we subsidize our crop insurance programs. And unfortunately, good intentions only go so far. So we could have good intentions with best management practices, but best management practices offer no guarantee of improvement.
Yeah. No, I think that's an interesting point, especially around the sort of subsidies as well, which is what a lot of farmers rely on and fall back on is the subsidies at the end of the season. Just that's certainly in Norway that can form a significant part of your income.
It can. So here I'll just pose an idea for you for folks listening, is that it's my opinion that acceptance of responsibility can equal empowerment. So when you're real with what you're doing and you're recognizing the outcome of your efforts, and you're going to hold yourself accountable, then we can look at real change, because then we're looking for solutions. We're not just waiting for them to come to us so we can implement them. And so, you've got the spectrum of people between pioneers and those kind of leading the edge as far as change. Early adopters, I was an early adopter, right? I recognized what some had demonstrated before me, and I said, man, I think I can do that. I might not be able to make it all happen in the first year, but I think over time we can probably do it. So let's give it a go. And we took some risk that way. And but it's paying off dividends. I mean, we have a resilience built up where we had D4 drought. I mean, D4 drought. We have an average expectation of about 25 inches of rain a year, and there was one year a few years back we had less than 10 inches, but we
Well,
still grew more forage overall on the farm because of the way we managed and how we were adaptive in the way we approached what we were doing. We didn't degrade the resource over those years because of the way we approached things. We were real about the conditions that we had, and we responded accordingly. We didn't say, well, we have to generate X number of dollars because of the obligations that we have with debt or inputs or whatever. We just said, well, listen, it's not going to do us any good next year to overgraze this year. So let's be real about it, and let's destock at a certain time.
but
And
you haven't changed the land, so you haven't like made like some aqua filters. You haven't sort of like dug lakes or done anything like that, have you?
No. So let's just take that for example. So there's been a lot in permaculture with swales and sculpting the landscape to catch water. The problem is that we hadn't addressed infiltration in that concept. So if you addressed infiltration and you actually absorb the water where it lands, you don't need all these catch basins,
Yeah.
right? It should
Yeah.
be sucked in like a sponge to be held for future production. Not only that, but to support the very microbes that you want to encourage to provide that future production. If we don't do that, we're already cutting off our left leg.
Mm.
So we got to look at all those things, right?
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. We had a drought. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, where one of the main regions out here for broccoli. Actually, I heard it was broccoli, and it was a dry year, and you've got such substantial losses on the crop that it was an absolute disaster for the whole region.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, just making sure that we have armor on that soil. One of the soil health principles is keeping that soil surface armor on. If we get soil temperatures up, we lose our water efficiency. So it's no different than having, you and I go out there. Yeah, it's one thing to go swimming at the beach for a while, but most of the time we're going to want clothes on to protect our skin, right?
Yeah.
And if we don't, we have to recognize the changes that we're going to have on that soil surface, just like our skin, and
Mm.
address things accordingly. But just from a water usage perspective, going from 70 degrees to 100 degrees Fahrenheit on soil surface temperature reduces water efficiency by 80%.
Yeah, I can well
It's
believe that. Yeah.
huge.
A while back, you said this is not about a destination; it's about the journey. So I'm just wondering where are you on your current journey, and what's the next stop? What's the next objective?
One of the goals is landscape change. So we're demonstrating what's possible so others can be encouraged and engage as well. The other is we're really not sure where top is. So we evaluated the organic matter level of our poorest farm field about 10 years ago. It was at 2.5%. And historically, for whatever accuracy there is, pre-European expansion here, they believed around 5.5, 6% was considered average or expected for organic matter. Well, 10 years later, with some really deliberate efforts, and this has been in a perennial system the whole time, just with animals integrated on with adaptive grazing, we're at just under 9% organic matter on that farm now. And so, I don't say that from a perspective of selling carbon credits, but just the resiliency we built. So, I mean, now we have a home for microbes, we have food for microbes. It produces almost despite us, not because of us each year, because of this resilience we've built and this community. I put it in perspective of how many Jersey cows we have now below every acre of our ground. So, that field, for example, thinking back now to the PLFA test, it was either 7 or 9 Jersey cows we were feeding below every acre of that 38-acre farm every year. And
Wow.
so, you would look at, oh, you have all these more mouths to feed. I'm like, absolutely, I do, and I'm joyfully feeding them because those are my workers that are ensuring the future production of the products that I'm harvesting and capitalizing off of in my farm business.
So to go from 2.5% to, did you say it was not around 9%?
Just under 9%, yes.
Yeah, I mean that in 10 years, that's like what were the sort of top few things that you did to get to that point? Was there
Yeah,
was
limit.
there a magic bullet, or was it 20 small things that you did?
Ooh, well, it was really being a keen observer and taking what we thought were appropriate steps based on what the soil was telling us, what the field was telling us. If the crop wasn't there, first of all, we're another paradigm. So when you're talking about efficiencies, a lot of grazers are looking at optimizing their utilization. That is the exact opposite of my goal. My goal is to grow as much as I can on the land and harvest as little as I possibly can because I want the rest of what I'm growing to feed those microbes in the soil surface. And so where focus was on putting down as much carbon as possible beneath the animals and letting them inoculate with that product that comes out the back end or their saliva or whatever it is. Even shedding of hair coat has got biology in it, and so all those things together was really providing an opportunity for a community to thrive. So no different than a community here. I mean, you want as much diversity. You want electricians, you want plumbers, you want safety workers, you want everybody working collectively towards a common goal. And so we were looking to encourage as much diversity in that group of community in that soil as we possibly could, and being real with the conditions that we had, and not try to put a round peg in a square hole. So there were years that I only grazed one time on that whole farm, and the rest of the time we let it rest and recover. And other years when we had the opportunity and the conditions, we could graze it more often if we thought it was going to fit in. But I think it was really putting the resource first and not putting our perceived context in the way we thought that soil was going to properly function.
So what were some of the other tactical things that you did? Did you plant, for example, hedgerows, or did you look at like cover crops, or what did you look at?
We planted nothing.
Okay.
We didn't integrate any. I mean, we've dabbled in intercropping in places like that. I can't say that. Well, the majority of the time, it hasn't brought a positive economic return. In so the question is if what's growing there now isn't producing or isn't thriving, why is that, right? So we got to ask the question why with what's there isn't it working, and um, and so yeah, it was just a matter of providing a disruption in the system, creating a need for the plants that were there to release more liquid carbon, so simple sugars in the root system to provide more food for microbes to enhance the system because we simply, I mean, historically that field is very rocky. A little more context would probably help that field. So first of all, it's 38 acres, and the last year we tilled it with a plow, we picked 41 loads of stones off of it, off of
Wow.
38 acres. And so, and it was majority of it was by hand. There was a little bit of machine work, but so it was a glacial dump, right? A glacier had come through years ago, and that's where all these rocks got ended up deposited. And so we, from a logical perspective, why would you continue to till that ground and have to pick all those stones? It didn't make any sense. So we said, well, it's going to be in perennials from here on out as long as we can keep it productive. And so it automatically didn't get that same disruption from tillage. It was a lower high water table field. It's changed over time because now it infiltrates water much better. But put a perimeter fence on it because we need to be able to control the livestock when, where, and how long. And I don't have any internal fences on any of my pastures, just permanent perimeters. So we have the flexibility of managing with temporary fence inside. We only brought animals when the conditions to that field were fit for the animals to be on there for the most part. Once we gained a little resilience, we could stretch that a little bit. But if we over impacted it, we planned for a longer rest and recovery period so that we weren't degrading it further. And from a basic perspective like that, I would say I don't even have what a lot of people would consider superior species out there. But the Brix levels are very sufficient to grow and produce what we're looking to produce off of it, and it works very, very well. So it's just an understanding of what's going on with the field and how to respond to what you're seeing.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And obviously you're seeing the results of it as well. Just going back to some of the future stuff. So you talked about some of the land changes. What types of projects are you looking to do?
Well, we're using livestock as a tool more. So, for example, we did a project on some public land to restore oak savanna using grazing cattle. So historically, the region had a very high percentage of oak savanna landscape, and some of it's grown up into less desirable species. And so hazelbrush is a big challenge there. The land managers would do some mechanical thinning, but without any follow-up plan, it would grow back into a thick, gnarly jungle again. And so we are looking at high stock density application of livestock to try to maintain some of those systems because some of those oak savanna systems are some of the most productive and biodynamic systems that we're aware of. So we were demonstrating what we could do with livestock there. We're also looking at certain areas of public land where the old notion was no management is good management. So we have so the farm owns some land right next to some of these wildlife management areas. And we were standing out in the middle of one of these public lands, just on a 40-acre piece. And I was talking with the land manager. I said, did you notice any difference from when we stepped over the fence line to ours? And we were just maybe a matter of 800 feet away. And the gentleman said, yeah, he said, it's embarrassing how quiet it is here. You walked across the fence on ours where we were integrating livestock and impacting things, and the disruption is being, I mean, answered, right? So we're imposing a disruption on the system, and then we're getting off, and we're saying, okay, we've challenged you now. What are you going to do? Almost like a good athlete, right? You're going to stretch yourself, you're going to push yourself, but you're going to allow enough time to rest and recover. That rest and recovery period brings all kinds of species of wildlife that we can encourage with proper animal integration. So we're demonstrating that in ways. We're demonstrating the fact that we can produce more nutrient dense food with this approach, depending on the scenario and the goals of the operation. We have an increased demand for grass produced products, especially dairy products today. And so with a greater awareness of the way we're producing, especially A2 milk under a grass situation can produce superior nutrient density and low toxin load compared to the industrial model. So we're helping farmers navigate away from just the theory of, well, we need to do this because it's good. Well, how we do it is just as important as what we do. So we're helping farmers capitalize and improve those practices increases profitability and resilience in the farm, and there's providing opportunity for the next generation to think about coming in and being a part of that operation because there are profit margins that there are in those sectors right now.
And you can really taste it in the milk as well, can't you? It's you
Yeah.
know, the fat levels and how creamy some of those milks are. It's just incredible. Talking about the next generation coming in, and obviously we've got some strange things happening in the world. What do you see as the sort of key challenges, and for I guess the immediate challenges, but the challenges of those that are sort of retiring now and new generations coming in? What are the sort of key challenges ahead that you can see?
So depending on the scenario and the region, some farmers work all their life to of course have the farm paid for, then maybe rent it out. A lot of landowners need to realize they still have a role to play in how that land is kept and how it's treated and managed. And it could be an asset compared to just a retirement policy. I think for the right reasons, and if you want to, you can. This idea that there's limited profit margins in this and that, we might have to do something that we thought we weren't going to be doing when we first started farming. But I mean, I have 5 boys that my wife and I are raising on our farm, and they range in age from 22 down to 15. And the middle son is the one that seems to want to be a part of the operation. So he just graduated from high school, and he'll be a part of the operation going forward. And we're gradually getting him a greater management role in that to learn and be able to bring his own ideas to the table. But then they're also responsible to a certain degree to bring their own business plan, right? It's not something that we have to pave the way for them and make everything for them. We need to provide the opportunity for them to be creative and go out of it. For example, so we truck a lot of water to cattle at different places of the farm. And so we found that these old, really large, wide-tired machines that used to be used for chemical applications are really, really good tools to be used for hauling water. So we pick up these things at a discount and we're repurposing them. And for a very small investment, we have the capacity to move thousands of gallons every day on the farm, and it gives us the ability to have the impact right where we want to have it. But again, that's an out-of-the-box thinking. I mean, if you drove by the farm, you'd wonder, what are we doing with all these machines now? We have almost a fleet of them, right? So we have backup ones because they are old. They might have a repair that has to be made, but I can have a spare sitting on the side. So different things like that. Just encourage creativity, but you have to be good about communicating the goals and bringing the next generation in with the management right away and accountability as far as that profit margin, and not just working per hour for the boss, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. Um, Doug, I think that's been amazing, talking to you and just hearing your journey and the things that you've been trying and the results that you've seen. I think it gives a lot of encouragement, and I think for me as well, just looking at farming and we're just seeing farms close. We're seeing certainly in Europe, there's a huge amount of pressure on farmers. We've now got inheritance tax on farms being handed down from generation to generation. There's a huge amount of pressure, and I think it's your perspective and the things that you're trying and doing gives a lot of hope, I think, and it's really encouraging to see that there's different ways of being able to farm and generate income and all the rest of it. So I was just going to ask, what would you be, in summary, what would be the key lessons that you've learned, whether it's sort of tactical lessons or sort of attitude lessons? What are the sort of key takeaways that you've since your time has taken over from your father? What would those be?
Yeah, well, first of all, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right, I believe. And so,
Yeah.
if you think you can do it, you can. It's got to be a community effort yet, but it has to be meaningful work. And so it has to go beyond just providing a paycheck for me personally. And I think for a lot of farmers, and that's where maybe we need to feed the deficiency of inspiration that we can. I mean, we've survived as a human race this long with a lot less. So what does that look like? And I think there is hope because I see without your health, you can't find much happiness. And we've recognized the fact that our food systems have been giving us nutrient deficient foods for a while now. So we need to be real with that. Whether that means growing a percentage of your own, great, if that is. I see two major focal groups. One's informed young families that want to do better for their children, and those that have already realized their mistakes, as maybe the elderly and their doctors telling them that they need to make changes in their lifestyle with their food choices, or they won't have very good end days. So um, I think we can. I think if we want to, we can. We have a lot more going for us probably than we realize, but we may have to let some habits, some addictions go, maybe. And collectively, I think we can accomplish a lot of great things.
So are you saying I should put the chocolate bars down?
No, I just maybe regulate a little bit less. I don't know. I don't know how much chocolate you eat. Maybe it's organic chocolate. It's all good. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, no, there is that. And just finally, how important do you think it is for events like the Yard Festival that we're putting together for knowledge sharing and people to attend to learn techniques and tips and to do knowledge dissemination?
Yeah, no, it's enormously important. Uh, just don't lose sight of the value of the foundation and the basics. So don't be looking for the silver bullet, but look collectively. So maintain a high level perspective while you're looking at all the small details that you may be considering. When we lose sight of the big picture, I think then we have an enormous risk of falling down rabbit holes that it's hard to crawl back out of again. But yeah, identify what it looks like in your mind to improve life, to improve culture, to improve environment, and be real about where you're at and what your current efforts are producing.
And Doug, where can people find and follow you and stuff online?
So you can find us at soilhealthacademy.org. We've got a fairly decent social media presence as well. Check us out. We offer some workshops around the U.S. and potentially internationally at some point here. We love to collaborate with the common goal of improving the resource and nutrient density of the food. So check us out. Drop us a line email. Engage at will.
No, that's brilliant. And Doug, it's great to talk because we've got researchers and we've got farmers and actually having someone that's gone through the whole consultancy, the whole practical side of things. It's a real treasure to have your knowledge brought into this as well. So really appreciate you sharing that with us and appreciate your time and involvement. And yeah, let's hope we can continue to collaborate.
Absolutely. Well, I need to encourage you guys because I have a self-declared love for brown cheese, and that the best comes from your region. So we got to keep that going.
I'll send you some of the post.
I'll be looking for it.
Great stuff. Thanks very much for your time, boss. Thanks.
Ever. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.